Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. Analytics topics covered conversationally and sometimes with explicit language.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. This is episode 291. Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of men? The shadow knows. Most of our listeners probably don't know that callback to the extremely famous radio drama The Shadow. But what they probably will recognize is the work that data and analytics people do that lurks in the shadows of our day-to-day. It's not really in the job description. It usually doesn't get recognized, but you do it anyway. Maybe some days you feel more like a janitor cleaning up ugly data, or a therapist listening to stakeholders' frustrations, or some sort of data marketer just trying to sell your wares internally. I think we should talk about it. Let me introduce my co-hosts. Mo Kiss, how you going?
I'm going great. Thanks for checking in.
Have you ever heard of The Shadow, the radio show, The Shadow? It was like from
but I'm deeply familiar with the sentiment.
Okay. Yeah. And Val Kroll, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Go Bears.
Yeah.
And hey, it was close. Tim Wilson. Probably the only other person that got
sitting around.
I was going to ask you if you remember
listening to the first episode of the Shadow.
I'm pretty sure that's not true because I think it came out like 1913 or something like that. So even that's before your time. But it ran for a long time. Anyways, I'm Michael Helbling. So this is what we want to talk about. So I think first up, maybe let's talk about what kinds of shadow work have you found yourself getting into in your career? Like, what are some of the categories or the types of things you've gotten into? And then as we sort of get into that discussion, maybe figure out if we thought it was necessary or not, or whether it was good or not. So who wants to start us off with some of the stuff you've run into?
Oh, I mean, the one that starts with a capital A. Admin. I think this is potentially more on the like internal side. I'm going to be curious to hear reflections, but I feel like there ends up being like a lot of cadences in a business. And I think I've gotten to a point now where I kind of see it and I'm like, if as a data team, you start to pick up like I don't know if admin's the right word, or like project management, or like heckling people to be like, you need to fill out this spreadsheet. Have you done this bit of this deck? Like all of that. And some people might think that that's fair, but in a space where you have like admin support and, you know, folks who are meant to have that as part of their role, I do feel like I see data people end up having to fill that gap a lot just to keep momentum moving forward. And it's almost like once you assume responsibility for it, it's almost impossible to ever roll it back.
I've thought, I mean, there's one specific part of that. There's like the input, I need to do admin to get stuff. And then when you first said admin, I was thinking like user governance, like, oh, somebody needs access to whatever. I feel like there's an admin part that I think is good for the analyst when an analysis is delivered or something is delivered that is supposed to lead to a decision and an action. That for a long time, I've like felt that the analyst does kind of need to own that, because it's pretty easy for somebody to say, yeah, that's awesome, but they don't really necessarily have an direct incentive to take the action as was prescribed. So, and that's like as an accountability mechanism for the analyst to say, oh, I'm going to be here because I know how to set recurring reminders, and I'm going to set a reminder to come back and say, hey, you said that was great, and in the next release you were going to do X or Y. Did you do it? And I don't
think that's admin though.
That's not admin.
I think that actually is what's the word? That's checking back to be like, if we said there was going to be some outcome, did we achieve that outcome? I would see that almost as being like accountable for measurement and making sure that we hit the success bar and making sure that other people in the business are accountable. I think it's more when you're like, I know, Tim, you're going to have strong views on this, but when you think of like monthly reports and cadences like that, And it ends up being about like getting people to fill out their section, not, hey, I'm doing the data bit and I'm going to like partner with my stakeholder on the commentary or whatever it is. It's like heckling and following up people and making sure people have like done their bit, because ultimately like a data person might be responsible for making sure the report's sent out or whatever. I think there's a difference between like ownership and making sure you're accountable and like following up people to make sure they do their job. Oh, is this going to be like a trigger point, Tim?
Well, it's interesting because I've definitely found in my career, Mo, where we would go to the business and we would have like a recommendation or insight from the data, which was all part of our job. And then a couple of weeks later, we'd be in a meeting with the IT department to explain what we wanted to change on the website as a result of that. And we're riding shotgun with the project now. And it's like, wait a second, when did we stop doing the analysis and start being the project managers for the implementation of this? And that was sort of when I was like, wait a second, what job do I actually have here? Because you're kind of like, I'm not doing data analytics. I'm now running sort of like an integration task force, if you will. So I don't know if that's more like in the line of what you're talking about.
It's such a fine line though, right?
Yeah.
Because
especially because if you want to see your insight go live, you know, you're like,
and it's something that I do worry sometimes, like data folks are like, here, I've got a recommendation. I'm going to throw it over the fence. It's your choice if you do it. And like not taking ownership. I think part of being a strategic partner is taking ownership and being like, I've made this recommendation. We've agreed on it. I want to see it forward and I'm part of this. I'm accountable to it too, because I've made this recommendation. So it is such a fine line between picking up too much of the behind the scenes stuff and what you actually need to do to like see the project or recommendation move forward from a business perspective.
Some of it gets down to just recognizing that if it's kind of, Michael, to your example, it's when everybody agrees that should happen. I mean, that's kind of like business 101. If it's like, well, everybody agrees, but no one actually assigned, there was no ownership assigned.
Yeah.
If you can do that in the moment, then a lot of times it's like, well, who should be doing this? If I wait and we haven't got, then it shouldn't be the analyst. But if everybody leaves and the analyst is saying, well, nobody's going to do it unless I step up and do it, that's a little bit of a shame on the organization, shame on the analyst. But there is that part of like the full life cycle does need to go all the way through. So what is the next milestone? Who's going to do what by when? And then looking at that person and being like, are they going to do it, or is somebody going to need to babysit them? Which isn't, I mean, that's kind of a reality of business as much as the analyst role, I guess.
As you were talking through the admin stuff, Mo, I think the consultancy equivalent of some of the admin work is, can you send me that thing that you told me you were going to send me? Can you send me that thing? Or can I have access to that? Or what, especially if it's like, I need one of your other partners or other agencies to send me or give me access to something. The number of times, like top of a call, like, okay, moving right along. Did you get approval for that one thing? Did they sign off on that thing? Are we good to move forward to that thing? Which is like a lot less
in the consulting space
connected to meaningful stuff, but
explaining another agency's data and analytics to the client. That's
that in my stomach.
That's some shadow work right there. And I'll even just say, like, listen, I don't think you want to pay me to explain this to you. So let's find a different way to do it. You know, not that I don't want to help you, but you know, I've had many experiences where they're like, okay, we got this from this, you know, maybe it's a different agency that runs like a specific program for them, like media or SEO or something. And they're pulling their own reports. They're like, how did they get these numbers? And I'm like, okay, so now you need me to go reverse engineer how they pulled these numbers together. And it's like, oh boy.
When did
that's
you get
actually not
asked
a bad
that?
part of shadow work. Getting poorly documented, regardless of where it comes from. Somebody wants me to take it forward. The first thing I have to do is basically replicate what was done so that I know what I'm carrying forward, which is just not, some of that can be addressed by documentation, but that's like this, there can be this expectation like, well, here's the number and it links to this dashboard. So surely you know everything you need to know. You're at the starting line. It's like, well, no, I'm still actually back in the in the locker room trying to get ready to come out to the starting line.
That's a good point. And getting coordinated so that everyone's kind of using the same data and everyone trusts the data that's being presented, whether it's internal or external, goes to that sort of like that work and preparation, I think, is very much a part of what I consider like a data and analytics role to be doing. But sometimes it falls in your lap in a weird way, maybe.
Okay, and I think the thing that comes to mind is the word alignment. So like not all shadow work is shit. Some shadow work is actually very valuable. It's just the fact that the business doesn't understand like how consuming it is or how important it is. And alignment, I think, is one of those things where it really is often about like this business unit thinks this, or this client thinks this, and this area thinks this, and like making sure that everyone is speaking the same language, whether it's about the metric definition, whether it's about the outcome of the work, or like that alignment piece, I think is incredibly important. But I don't think it's always something that the business understands that is such a big part of a data practitioner's role.
I second that. I mean, I think even the alignment, what is it? We ran this campaign. What was it supposed to do? And then the fact that the analysts are like, well, I need to be in the meeting up front like that. We need to make sure everybody's on the same page of what we're trying to accomplish. It's not run it. And then the analyst gets involved because the data now exists so they can pull it and they can provide the answers that upfront, which, I mean, some would say I co-created a consultancy that is geared a lot more around trying to get multiple parties on the same page so that the analytics work or the experimentation work can be productive and successful, is a huge part.
Yeah. I'll third that motion on sometimes the shadow work is like really important to move it forward. When we first started talking about this topic, the first thing that came up for me, and granted, I do have very much of a recency, experimentation bend, is like the culture of experimentation work, how that's like become more prominent, especially, on LinkedIn in the zeitgeist about how to be successful with experimentation. But if you think like how many other roles around a business have to make space for everything that they're supposed to be doing after the job description was approved and you were hired, right? But it really is all about like building consensus and getting people excited and a little dose of education, a little dose of this is why you should care about what I do kind of stuff. And I feel like sometimes that's a little...
The culture of finance, the culture of accounting,
famous.
You got to really build a culture
for going
of
around
marketing.
to get people on board. Well, maybe during budgeting season, but just to go back to the point that it's not that it's not important, but it's usually not the first thing you think of when you're like, oh yeah, I lead an experimentation team inside of an organization. It's not that it's not important, but it's usually not the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, it does seem like maybe to bridge from that to like explaining the realities of the data, which kind of takes two angles. Like there's always going to be a presumption that the data is cleaner, more accessible, less ambiguous, which is like, no, our data as a company, it is always wildly more complicated than any kind of new person to it thinks it is. And then there's the other part of that is what the data can and can't deliver. Like the data is the objective truth. So there's a data fluency component where it does sometimes feel like in analytics, and maybe this is the grass is always greener on the other side. If you're talking about finance, somebody's a financial analyst, somebody would expect that they're an expert around finance and they can go to them and defer to their expertise. I feel like in marketing and product and digital analytics, sometimes it's like there's not a presumption of knowledge of complexity. And there's kind of, the shadow work is building trust, building the relationship, walking them at the appropriate pace through, why a diff and diff is not appropriate in this situation, so there's an educating of the business partners that does feel like it's a proportionally heavier lift than many other roles. Does that count as shadow work?
Tim, when someone asks which channel has the highest ROI adjusted for LTV, how long does that take you?
Pull GA4, then export to Excel, write SQL for BigQuery, find my LTV formula. I don't know, I'd say about 3 hours and a couple of existential crises.
Well, at least 2. This is why AskWhy's full stack approach works. Ask in plain English, Prism orchestrates across your stack and applies your saved calculations.
So I'm not manually stitching together 5 tools like some kind of data Frankenstein?
Nope. Everything's traceable, not a black box. Data stays secure. Semantic layer is generated code, runs locally. It's all set up for you.
So for a product with a name that makes you think of a toddler asking why repeatedly, this is pretty sophisticated.
I'm not sure making fun of our sponsor's name is the move here, Tim.
Wait, I did say pretty sophisticated. That's a compliment.
All right, fair enough. Well, go to ask-y.ai. That's ask-y.ai and use code APH for priority beta access. Join the rise of the AI analyst.
100%. Yeah, I think so. Or even some of that same concept, the explanation to like back-end developers, like you were talking about the business partner audience, but that was one. I think we were talking about this a little bit too, Tim. I know that you have scars, but the story that comes to mind for me when I worked at the American Medical Association, we were working off of the free version of GA at the time, and we had just gotten an analytics canvas license to overcome the sampling. So it would like hit like every 30 minutes or every hour, whatever it was, so that we could extract, air quotes, all the data. And I remember like there was some back-end developers who were like, oh, perfect. Now you can just give us all of your GA data every night and we'll just throw it into the membership cube. And I was like, it doesn't work like that. Also, like, what do you mean everything? Like, do you even, but like so many conversations that got escalated. My boss had to pull me into it. And it was like, you guys, this is not like, maybe this is on me at this point for not being able to explain this, but this is a little bit of a nightmare. But the other thing is that membership cube, the ID, the key was the membership ID. And I was like, do you think that the only people who visit our website are members and that they're authenticating at least once every 30 days? Like, you are off your rocker. But it was like at least 3 months of my life spent on that topic, if not longer.
And a lot of times shadow work is just cleaning up or trying to clean up a data warehouse you inherited from a previous team or something like that. You know, you walk into an org and they're like, oh, we want to do this, and this amazing thing. And you're like, well, the Snowflake instance we have is not going to do any of that till we really clean up a bunch of it. And you're
helps.
Yeah.
Is this like one of those times where you read my exact life situation that is going on right now? Where we're having to do a huge rebuild of our entire data warehouse for a very specific, like very similar reason, right? Like the data wasn't structured in a way that we can answer the business questions of today. And so, and I think the thing that's so hard about projects like this is they're often huge and very time intensive and unlocks a heap of value, but people don't see the value until like months later, sometimes a year later.
It's a long time. And it's hard to go pitch those because it's not very sexy or very exciting to be like, it's not doing anything but setting up a potential for a future as opposed to delivering a business result. Like, it's so much nicer to go in and say, hey, here's this analysis where we can make $100 million more this year if we do X, Y, and Z versus, hey, we need to spend a bunch of money redoing stuff we already have because it's not doing this, this, and this. And eventually you can write the business case to show like where the value will come from. But man, it's an uphill battle. I don't know if that's shadow work exactly, but
I think there's often, I mean, I will see that example and raise it one with wait for a year. And this, I lived this scenario many times, but like the most kind of horrifying one, I think, traumatic one, working with a large pharma company that was using Adobe Analytics. And they said, we're going to get everything into a Azure, data store of some sort. And so many requests, they'd say, oh, we don't have that yet, but it's all going in. And they were just locked into these backend developers said, we're going to take the Adobe's horribly weird and never really thought through you got to take the viz high and viz low, like stitching, like messy data feed data. And they were saying, we're just going to pump it in at that raw level, and then we'll just kind of write SQL queries that people can use. I'm like, the SQL query just to answer how many users came to this page is kind of a beast. But we couldn't get an audience with them because they were just convinced, which seems very common with developers. And I feel like is maybe less of an issue if you're taking kind of an event-driven sort of product analytics perspective. But anytime you're going to something where you've got this deduping sort of sessionization, like developers think of like event, they don't think of the need for stuff to be deduplicated by something. So this idea that, well, we'll just pump all the raw data in and then you'll be set. You'll just have to write SQL, which then becomes a case of needing to maintain SQL libraries. I think, I don't know whether Mo, you're like, that really doesn't happen if you've done it right, or whether you're thinking, yeah, no, that happens. Oh, or.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's tools that help with that, like, DBT or Dataform or stuff like that helps you kind of maintain your SQL in repositories and use it effectively. But
sometimes that's, to me, you're like, you've gone with this, like, let's get the full ocean. And then we're gonna add layers on top of it.
And then the downstream is the next question that comes from the business user requires yet another SQL query to be written to build out the next reportlet or whatever. So you put yourself in a pretty challenging chain of events just to get answers to data, which AI will totally solve. So no worries.
And literally that's about to be my comment. I think the biggest challenge right now is that everyone thinks that you can overcome a shitty data architecture with AI, which is just like so fucked and hard to manage, because you're like, literally that'd be broken unless we have the right data architecture. The same way that we'd need to write a bespoke SQL query, or like you don't even know where to point the question because of the way we've structured the data. Like that's the problem that we need to solve. And it's not sexy. Like getting the buy-in is incredibly difficult for this stuff. And it probably is the hardest, I would say one of the hardest parts of my role right now.
So that is deep, because the business, it's kind of the business partners who ultimately want to get value from it. It's not going to maintain their attention or technical depth, but the analyst is supposed to be engaging with them and serving them. So the analyst becomes the proxy for the business and is now dealing with the back end. And so like they become subject matter experts in an area that has nothing to do with running analyses or validating hypotheses. It's just they're living in that middle tier and there's just no one else. The shadow has to serve it because there is no one. That's all there is. That's the best you got.
Spot on. And then you end up with like one or two people in the business who know one area and no one else can do it because it's so complex and there are all these like gotchas. So even if you're going to write a bespoke SQL query, it has to go through this one or two people because they're the ones that know those tables, know how to use it well. And like that, then you've created your own bottleneck, right? And it's not an intentional thing. I think often the systems were created with the intent to have a lot of flexibility, but then by having flexibility, you don't have enough standardization and like, it's a chicken and egg. But I would say that is one of the hardest shadow tasks for sure.
There does seem like there's like a macro thought, this whole topic of the show, that it's like I feel like I've worked with analysts who take the attitude, well, that shouldn't be my job. So it's not my job. So I'm not going to do it. And then it kind of falls through the cracks and doesn't happen.
So like on that meta thing, like there's something to the idea that like some people by personality are going to be more suited to generalist types of roles versus specialist ones, or more drawn to them. And so like I'm definitely much more of a generalist. So like when I find myself running further afield of like doing the actual data work and the analysis, it doesn't bug me at all. It's actually kind of fun to see something different and do something different for a little while. I sometimes will think about like, is this really truly serving our purpose? Are we getting done what we need to get done? But like generally speaking, doing those tasks, not a big deal. I feel great about it. But I absolutely think there are people who like, that is much more disconcerting to step outside of the role to do those things and less of something that plays to their strengths and much more plays to like the things they definitely do not want to do. And so like, that's the other issue is just sort of like the person kind of matters a little bit to this too.
Yeah. And I don't think, I mean, at least from my personal experience, it hasn't been like a conscious choice of like, whether I'm going to step outside or, you know, get in someone else's lane, but it always feels like I'm tugging on a thread of something that in the moment feels necessary for me to understand what I'm analyzing or to understand root cause of like why that had been a problem. I mean, and a lot of times I personally just get fascinated by like, you know, authentication handshakes and like, you know, all the different nuances in that space, but it always ends up feeling like it's adding to this like mosaic of my understanding, which always feels like it pays dividends in the future too. So I've never tried to quiet that voice. Also, I'm just really nosy. So
this reminds me of me going overboard on it, where there were webinars in a company that like, we think we know what webinars, you have a registration and attendance. This was in a business model where it was not that at all. And it was like bonkers how salespeople would sometimes go into an office and sit and watch the webinars. And there were 2 or 3 systems involved. And the more I pulled on that thread, it definitely was interesting, but it was like, oh, wow, I was looking at this one table of data and interpreting that attendees meant the number of people who attended the webinar. And that was completely wrong. And I wound up writing up, it was probably a 10 or 12 page document, very, very clearly written, because there were all these parties in different places. And I thought, nobody has pulled all this together. I have done the most glorious, valuable. This is so useful. I am pretty sure not even the webinar business owner read it. And I got probably 25% of the information from her, but I was like, oh, she was excited to explain to me the nuances and the complexity, but I kept digging further and further and saying, aha, look what the external consultant, has done to really help you understand what's going on here. And there was kind of no interest. So that was one where I'm like, it was useful for me. It should have been useful downstream. In today's world now, boy, I'd be throwing that into an LLM somewhere and saying that's really helpful data potentially. But I'm pretty sure that document, I was like, I became the domain expert on something that people cared about. Webinars, they did not care to hear how messy it was to interpret any of the data that was captured.
Well, and that's the thing that's resonating with me a lot right now. One of like the values that I do leadership values. It's a weird, corny thing. But one of them is be unwaveringly useful. Does anyone pop quiz? Anyone remember where that comes from?
I don't think so.
From being useful would be Cassie?
Our good friend Cassie.
Yep. I got it. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. Yep. She put it in one of her blog articles and it's always resonated with me. And I'm completely contradicting myself now, because at the start I was like, don't pick up the admin work. But I'm the first person to be like, if someone's not doing something and I can add value or move something forward, I'll normally just end up doing it. So like I am, a walking contradiction. But I do think there is part of that responsibility of data folk. Like I tend to get really frustrated when a data person is like, well, that's not my job. And I'm like, your job is to help the business make better decisions. So if there is something you can do to be useful to help the business make better decisions, that is your job. I don't know. That's just the thing that's bubbling around in my mind at the moment not relevant to Tim's example, but more broadly about this area of like, sometimes it is about getting the domain expertise. Sometimes it is about documenting something that no one in the business has written down. It's like, sometimes those things are less useful, but a lot of the times they're really useful.
Just to give some people who might be listening a chance to sort of be like, well, maybe Mo, I can't do that thing, or I'm not good at that thing. Isn't necessarily that you have to go personally be the one in charge of that, as much as be part of helping solve it in some way, see that it gets done. So it's more of like the ownership taking versus the taking on the role and doing it yourself, just so that people who are very specialized or don't. Yeah, because I have a ton of empathy for people who are like, Michael, I just can't get up in front of people and talk because like I analyze data and that's what I like to do. And I'm very stressed out every time I have to go present something. And it's like, okay, well then someone else can do that part, but like you just need to make sure you're facilitating it up to the moment where it happens. So it doesn't have to be you necessarily taking on that role.
I don't know if I agree.
So don't pick presenting something then, something else, like managing the project or something like that. But the point being, like, not every person fits every single role. Like, you don't have to be a polyglot, if you will, or a polymath.
If you first break all the rules, like the precursor to the now discover your strengths finder, but first break all the rules. I've always, to that same point, like identifying what needs to happen. And I think, Mo, that's like the brilliant way to frame it. Like, what is your job? It is not to write SQL. It is not to develop reports. It is not deliver results. It is to move the organization forward by helping them make decisions. And if you say, well, that means that somebody every Tuesday morning needs to reach out to this one person and ask them a question, like, it can be frustrating. It can suck. But you know what? There's somebody who's actually super sociable, who loves to ping people or whatever. Like, building up that list is kind of, these are the discrete tasks. Not that somebody's going to love and relish doing every one of them, but it does at a team level help start to shift around, like, oh, somebody needs to document these database tables, or somebody needs to be our, ask why guru. They need to know how that tool works really well. Figuring out who gravitates to it. I do think and I think I was cringing similarly with Michael grabbing a random example. There is a fine line between what does a complete analyst need to be able to do, even if they're outside of their comfort zone. So it gets a little squishy. Which of this is shadow work that like somebody's got to do it, this person gravitates to it? Which of this is going to be a really ineffective handoff because someone just doesn't want to write SQL? I'll use that example. I'm just not the kind of analyst who's going to learn to write code. It's like, cool. Then you're not the kind of analyst who's going to progress particularly far in your career. So cool. We got it.
Hey, I've gotten pretty far. So, no, now you can't do it. You can't.
But I don't want to get into team dynamics too much, but I do think a big part of figuring out the shadow work as a team is figuring out who has strengths for different parts of it and like making sure people lean in. Like, I know in my previous team, we had like a really big gap of, we didn't really have someone who was really good at the like, I would say like leadership team, documenting stuff, pushing it forward, like hyper organized, being like, hey Mo, these are all the things we have coming up in this, this time frame. And so we very intentionally hired someone that was really strong in that space to complement our team. And I think that we really need to be thoughtful of like, what are all those kind of things, especially the shadow work, because if you put someone on something and that's their strength, it's so much easier for everyone. Like, they feel like they're adding value, that like the balance feels better. And like, to be fair, there are some things that no one particularly wants to do. And then it just comes about like making sure everyone takes a turn.
Can we hit on that stuff a little bit? And maybe this administrative work, maybe more broadly, because I think that is the danger there. And I do think I've seen stuff written that women are much more likely to get screwed on this one, is that this thing needs to happen. And they're like, oh, well, it's admin work. Like the latent misogyny, maybe not intentional, is, well, Mo's really good at that. I'm like, but it's absolute shit work and she's not gonna speak up. So I think there is that, like, the shadow work that needs to be done, that has value, that is being done as efficiently as possible, and there can someone gravitate to it. shadow work that has to be done. There is value. No one wants to do it, and making sure that doesn't fall to the passive, nice person, because that can spin out where, wait, now half of your job is unseen shadow work and you can't advance in your career, even though everybody's like, well, this all needs to be done. But good old Jane is, always there for it, but it's in the shadows. It's not getting, it's not visible.
So this is actually kind of an interesting pivot, Tim, because as you turn into a leader in your space or leading teams and those kinds of things, your job becomes taking the work out of the shadows for some of the exact reasons you just said, because it needs to be recognized what's being done. The people doing it need to be recognized. And then who should be doing it should be much more strategically thought out, as opposed to, quote, fallen into just because, so-and-so is more agreeable. So they just take it on without fighting too much, which is just a terrible solution to the problem. So anyways, I thought that was a really great point, Tim. And I think that's sort of the thing to maybe take away is like, when you turn from an individual practitioner or individual contributor into a leader, when you're just an IC sitting at your desk, you're like, wow, I do all this shadow work. When you're a leader, you're like, we need to take the shadow work and expose it to the light.
That sounds hard. That's why I'm not striving to be a leader.
I do think, though, it also is about like recognition. And like one of the things that I would say, like, and I'm thinking of this particular person, like I know at the moment their rating would be very good, or like they're like an assessment of their performance, right? Because I value that work. And so I think where the challenge is like when there's that tension where someone's like picking up a lot of shadow work that then is not valued or not given the value that it's deserved. Yeah. Whereas I see it as like being incredibly essential. And if you do that shit well, like you can unlock a lot for your team or the business. And so like, I want to make sure that that's rewarded and reflected. So there's a lot of nuance though. Like obviously it's very dependent on specifically like what tasks we're talking about and the business and many factors.
I just like to say to all of Mo's team who is listening to this podcast, she's talking about you. She values you.
Oh, wow.
She gave us the name off mic and it was your name. So good
That's
job.
Right.
Stop it. You were so cruel.
The other thing that this is making me think about is that when any in-house role that I've had, I've never reported to an analyst. It's always been, a head of digital or someone else who it was really hard to message up, not only for myself when I was the IC, but then when I grew my team about all the things it takes. Like, I was like, do you think we just sit there and like conveyor belt, just like analyze? Like that's so not all that the job is, right? So there's a lot more education in that scenario, whereas I was thinking about your comment, Michael, like with the elevation of analysts into those leadership roles, that there's a lot more visibility and line of sight. So I agree with you on the accountability we're going to put on any listener to bring that work out of the shadows and acknowledge and like what you were talking about, Mo. So that's a really good point.
And I think what we're finding out is that the work has value. And whether we should be doing it or not as analytics people isn't necessarily all of the story. Like sometimes you should like go back and say like, okay, workflow wise, the solution should be to take this group and pull them into this piece of work and, rearrange it and come up with a strategy. So like my early example, Tim, you kind of pointed out, we exposed basically an organizational workflow flaw when we came up with an insight and then had to go drive the insight through the org. What we exposed was like, no one had thought about, hey, what if we have an optimization we want to make a reality? How does that get done in our company? Well, somebody should have probably thought about that. And so that was the work that had to be done, was like to figure out and create a machine that would take care of that. But it's the same thing with all the rest of it. Is sort of like, okay, well, what are the parts that need to move into the right places to get it done? Not necessarily you, the data analyst, should do it, but that it gets done because it is valuable work at the end of the day, especially if it's actually driving impact or decision making in the organization using data, which is sort of like the thing that makes me smile anytime I get a chance to be part of something like that.
Can we talk about data quality? We have not touched on that at all.
It's usually pretty good. I mean, just kind of automatically
Yeah.
What do you mean? What does there talk about?
So I'm pretty sure
I think
internet AI is going to totally
Oh my
fix
God,
that.
stop. Everyone stop triggering me.
Sorry, well.
Just come on. I think the one that I'm specifically comes to mind is spend sent from a media agency. And I just get so frustrated. Or from a finance team. Like,
Talk about the highly formatted Excel files you might be receiving.
In wide format when they should be in a long format. Oh, of course.
I'm glad you can all laugh about it. I am not at the laughing stage.
Sorry, Mo. This is probably a whole episode we need to do on stuff like this.
But I think what's so fucking hard is that your stakeholder will be like, especially the one that owns the relationship with the media agency. I don't get it. They sent a spreadsheet over on Monday. Like, you've got the data. What's the problem? Like, why is it going to take you a week? And you're like, do you know that every single city that they run media in is in a completely different format? And we then needs to sense check it with our record. No, that is a huge lift. And fuck. Anyway, and then you've got some very senior, brilliant data scientist that is spending their time basically QAing data. It's really frustrating.
Well, but that is one of those cases where that's another shadow that the analyst can fall into, where they're the bridge between the data creation, and that data may be created out of some contractual necessity, but doesn't have any real incentive or stake outside of what's in an agreement. It's like, oh, we'll send you data, check the box. And this is going after media agencies pretty hard, that a lot of times they don't really they're like, well, whatever the platforms, Trade Desk spits this data out or runs into our data warehouse and we'll just give you a feed. And the analyst is the one who winds up having to explain their data to them. So it's like another version of that particularly is another version of what you were talking about earlier, Michael, where you have to be like, yeah, how can this possibly be, zeros across here? And it's like, wait a minute, I'm now having to reach out to everybody seems to assume that it's coming in fine, but I have to set up time to go 3 levels deep with some partner to get them to agree that it's actually a problem or explain to me why it's not a problem. Yeah. That's a big
I'm
one.
Literally in a situation like that right now. I ran into a situation just this past week where a company is like, yeah, we're pretty sure the quality of the data in this system is great. And so I get my hands on it and immediately see 3 things I'm pretty sure making their data quality really bad. And so you're literally starting out with sort of like, okay, well, our first conversation is going to be, guess what? The data you thought was really good? Not good. And there's a number of fixes we're going to need to do before we even start on the things we want to get further along on. And it's frustrating, but real, right? So it's sort of like, yeah. And then the other one that gets me sometimes is sort of like alerts and notifications, anomaly detection, and those kinds of things. Because that is a part of data, but it's not really what an analyst does necessarily.
Well, the analyst gets blamed if the data all of a sudden it's found that something wasn't there for weeks. They're like, what were you doing as an analyst? How did you not notice that?
Raise your hand if you're the only one that's had your own secret dashboard so you don't get caught up in one of those things, so you have advanced warning of something that's happening.
I think anomalies is part of our job, but you all keep saying analyst, and I think of data practitioners, whether it's a data analyst, analytics engineer, data scientist. So for example, if there is something in our B2B pipeline that breaks our leads coming through, that is absolutely quote unquote data quality anomaly detection, and I would expect an analytics engineer to go in and solve that. Absolutely. When we're talking at the complete other end of a metric goes up, a metric goes down, that sort of stuff, again, I would expect a data person to go in and kind of debug that. They might not be responsible for the complete up level challenge of why that thing is or isn't working anymore. But like, I would expect someone to be pretty across that if we saw like a number tank or something like that, or a number skyrocket.
But that's the way you just framed it, you're just speaking off the cuff, that there is a perception that, they need to catch if a number tanks or a number skyrockets. In practice, every time I've had a system where it's like trying to tune where like there's not a threshold, then there will be platforms out there to say, look, you can set this at a 95% threshold, set up 100 alerts. I'm like, cool, I'll get on average 5 alerts a day and start ignoring it.
I'm not necessarily expecting a data person to catch them all. I think that's a really hard thing. And it's so difficult, right? Because like if you have a stakeholder who comes to you and is like, hey, this number declined, and you're the data person who's like, what? I had no idea. Like, that's shit. It's hard for trust. But at the same token, expecting a data person to be able to like be ahead of the game on every anomaly is like also not an expectation I have. But I would basically be like, okay, something has gone wrong here. I'm going to reach out to my stakeholders. I'm responsible for letting them know. I'm responsible for letting them know what we're doing to investigate, how we're going to solve it, keep them updated. That absolutely, I do think, is a data person's role.
So, Michael, I still have the alert turned on for a certain tax preparation company that you and I worked on.
Oh, nice.
Years ago. And like January 12th, their homepage was down from Seattle. So I just never turned it off. But that was one where they were having sporadic issues. And it was like, somebody should be monitoring this, and I can go set something up. And I had to set up on like my personal account, and I just never turned it off. So literally, Michael knows the brand. I know the brand. It was down for about 35 minutes.
Yeah,
did you let them know?
7 or 8
Tell
days
them,
ago.
Tim?
You need to do some account access cleanup. That's some shadow work that a lot of consultants have to do. Get yourself off of those old GA accounts or Adobe accounts that you've been on for years and years that you no longer work with.
Site 24/7. I was doing like,
okay.
Like a ping tracker that I'd set up. So it was, I had set it up. And it was
a third party tool. You're doing third party data collection.
A third party tool.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're probably like, why is our website getting crawled by this website?
But they were sometimes saying like, the tool is down. And I'm like, no, like, why is this anomaly in the data? Because your fucking site went down. Like, that's not because I think I set up a ping for the footer as well. Because based on where they had the tagging track. But I think it started with them saying your digital analytics, your web analytics data is bad. And I was like, yeah, that's weird. What's going on? It's like, well, no, the whole I
did once find, so I was working somewhere, there was like an issue that I couldn't figure out like why this number had gone weird or whatever. And then like a month after I left, I figured out why. And it was like completely tangential. I was just working on something different. And I did reach out to let them know. I was like, hey, this is probably what this was. You should fix it. Here is how to fix it. You're welcome. I'm not a shit human. I want everyone to have the best data they can.
I also get it's back up. So every time I've seen it, it's come back up quickly. So there hasn't been a point.
Okay, so before Michael wraps, because you got that look in your eye.
Well, take your time.
I would love to hear people's thoughts on shadow work, not shadow work, for like data fluency, data literacy. We'll call it because data literacy programs, I think, are one of the more common ways people talk about it, because it is like a whole
quote data culture
category of work. Yeah,
I like data fluency. I think it's less obnoxious than data literacy.
Agreed.
Yeah,
everybody can read and write.
Yes. So is it shadow work? Not shadow work.
I think it's shadow work, but I think it's important shadow work.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that sort of like, what do you need to do to help the organization take a step forward with data, make decisions, use the data, be effective with the data. And a lot of times that's building up data fluency in an org, or helping people build up their data fluency.
But that's one where if you try to bring it out of the shadows and say, oh, why don't we just solve this once and for all and send everybody through a data fluency program, pretty ineffective. So it's a thing that needs to be in the shadows that is not that there's not the opportunity for some of that training. I feel like I've been learning how much, it's the reality of a short attention span, that the more you can have like in the moment, like, let me come up with let me show you this now. Let me explain this little thing now. Let's talk about, oh, you know what? Well, you know how people say correlation is not causation? This is like the perfect example. Let's talk about that for 5 minutes because that's a trap you're falling into.
Tim, it actually makes me think about gender bias training and like all the research on that, where it actually like lots of companies do gender bias training, doesn't necessarily result in any differences in like behavior or attitudes or anything, but it's like a tick the box thing. And I think when we start talking about like data fluency or training or education or whatever it is in the data space, I think what happens when we sometimes roll out those programs with really good intent, it's a tick the box thing. But again, like those in the moment.
That sounds like the sort of observation a woman would make, by the way.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh boy.
I just had to, it was right there.
Okay. We're going to send Tim back to training.
Those in the moment discussions are actually what I think makes it so hard, because it is shadow work, because it's not like I built a program, I've shipped it, I've ticked it, it's done. It's like every time I talk to this stakeholder, I'm trying to help them get a little bit further in how they think and understand data. And that is you're never done. You've never ticked the box. And so it does have like a very heavy cognitive load, but it's incredibly important and probably leads to the best outcome, I say, without a data-informed opinion on that at all. Just my gut.
So I'm actually surprised that you guys are all on the same page as I don't think it's shadow work at all, whether it's like bite-sized or a big part of it. Because I mean, to even some of the criteria we were talking about using earlier, if your role is to help the business make smarter decisions, like making sure that you're connecting what you're finding, what you saw, what you observed, what you validated, what your recommendations are with like what the business can actually be doing with that information. It feels like it's I don't know, to put it another way, there was a leader who I worked for at UBS who, like the 4 Ds of product development, like the define, design, develop, deploy. He always said there was a 5th, like shadow, not actually, a 5th one of adoption. And so like, until you understand how people are using that, or if this is like a data product or whatever, then you're not done. Like the work isn't done when you ship it. Like the work is done when you understand and create the feedback loops, right? So I feel like it's very much in the same vein of how to make sure that your work continues. Like Michael, the work almost similar to what you were saying, creating the processes so that the team knew how to take advantage of those recommendations. I don't know. I just feel like it's not, like you're not done just when the analysis is complete. Or
shadow work isn't optional. Like it has to happen. It's just not.
Yeah.
It feels like it's squarely in the court of. I would expect it to be in a job description. Like that's what makes it make me feel like it's not shadow work.
Again, that's where I think some of this work should rise up out of shadow work. But again, it's about recognition. Like the importance of it, I completely agree. But Tim's point, I think, was, will you see it in a job description? Probably not. Or if you do, it'll be like run a once in a quarter training and call it done. And we all know that's not going to be effective. But it's spending that time. Like I'm realizing in this episode that like 90% of what I do is shadow work sometimes. It's like so hard to pin
Michael
down.
Works the shadows.
That or I just don't do anything. I don't know. But I remember I had a very specific instance where I had a review and my boss at the time was like, you're not spending your time the way that it should be spent. And I had to actually walk him through it. If I spent the time the way that they wanted me to, it would lose the company money. And I walked him through step by step. Like if I actually did it the way you said, the company would lose money as a result of the effort. So what you're telling me is that you would like the company to lose this much revenue by changing what I do day to day. Are you sure that's what you want? And so it was a really interesting conversation because I was able to enunciate exactly where the value lied in each of those things that I was doing. I could show the outputs of those things, but it was a very interesting conversation because it was like, oh yeah. Now in that case, I had actually prepped that person ahead of time by showing them exactly how I was going to spend my time. They just ignored it and came back with the template. But
what was the outcome though? Like, what was the end of the story? Did you get asked to change it, or did they like be like, I see the value of what you're doing?
I kept going. Yeah, no, I was, that was a role in which firing me probably wasn't an option. Probably they felt like it in the moment. I sent an email to the head of HR ahead of that meeting being like, I'm about to chew up my boss. But it worked, and I still had a good relationship with that person afterwards. But it was a situation where they were like, oh, okay, well, never mind then. And I just kept going with what I was doing. So made sense.
I will claim that to the job description that I think when we read job descriptions and say, well, this is looking for a unicorn, that's ridiculous. Or when we read a job description and say, wow, that looks really good. I bet I'm thinking through some that I've seen, the ones that actually have the shadow work articulated as, hey, part of the responsibility is collaborating with the business partners to how to ask questions in an informed way. I think that actually it would be fascinating to look through some job descriptions that when people say this is garbage and say, is any of the shadow work captured? Hey, this one looked, because you've had that reaction where you look at one and you're like, oh, they get it. Like they're describing a realistic and practical role. And I bet that is because there are nuggets of what you'll be expected to do include some of the shadow work we've talked about today.
Okay, but just a push on that. I do agree. I think the challenge though is like in my role, we write the job descriptions for data people. Data people are writing job descriptions for data people. So you can still have a mismatch with the stakeholder of what they think a data person should be doing. Like, so it's not, I'm just saying it's not like bulletproof.
Yeah. I mean, but I think part of if that's recognized, it's like, hey, we've got a bunch of really difficult, unrealistic, stakeholder we should have in the job description, that part of this is kind of collaborating with, you don't say collaborating with assholes, but you're like, collaborating with, educating, informing, iterating with, so I think
assholes
still can be captured
in ambiguous and challenging circumstances.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah,
we know
exactly.
what that means. A shorthand for asshole.
Self-starter, able to juggle multiple priorities simultaneously. It's like,
Often when the hiring manager isn't an analyst, then that's why the job description doesn't have the shadow work in it. And that does set up some of the
and it comes out ringing false. Yeah. Well, some of my shadow work is trying to get this show wrapped up on time. So let's go to do that.
Yeah.
We got to find somebody who's good at it.
Right? Let's hand that off to somebody else. All right. Well, listen, Mo and Val and Tim, thank you so much. This is, I think, a really interesting topic, and I appreciate your insights on the show. A lot of work is really important, but doesn't necessarily get recognized for what it is. And I think that's sort of where this discussion took us today. So thank you for that. As you're listening, I imagine you're thinking some of the thoughts yourself. We'd love to hear from you. And you can reach out to us. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn or the Measure Slack chat group, or through email at contact@analyticshour.io. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever platform you listen to it, give us a review or a rating or a comment. We'd love to see it, love to hear it, love to hear from you. And of course, a couple other things. We're not doing last calls, but a couple of things where you can find us coming up in this year is at a few conferences, and actually coming up really quickly. So I know Tim and Val, you all will be at the DataTune conference in Nashville. Is that right? You want to talk about it?
Yeah, it's a Friday is workshops, and Saturday it's a conference. It's a pretty low cost, low three figures conference all day. It looks kind of not measure campy from an unconference perspective, but from a enthusiasm and critical mass of people showing up.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting topics. So
what are the dates?
Yeah. That would be important.
Yeah. I'm here for
6th
you.
6th and 7th.
Talk about shadow work.
Yeah. When is it?
That's awesome. And then, of course, Measure Camp New York will be in March 28th in New York City. It's officially in New York City, not New Jersey this year.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be a great Measure Camp is always a great time. Obviously, Val super involved with Measure Camp Chicago, Mo with Measure Camp Sydney, Tim with Measure Camp Columbus, me with not being involved with Measure Camp in any official capacity, but I love going to them. And I think right now, Tim and I are planning to be at that one, and that's March 28th in New York City. And then finally, April 28th and 29th, the whole Analytics Power Hour, or a lot of the Analytics Power Hour folks, will be at the Marketing Analytics Summit in Santa Barbara, California, which sunshine on the West Coast. Hello. Get there.
Sign me up.
I'd love to.
And we got some exciting plans for that. Stay tuned to future episodes.
What's the drink that you have in Santa Barbara? What's like a good cocktail for that?
I'm sure it's some fruity
Wine?
California liberal something.
Wine.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wine.
White wine or a rosé on the beach
Correct.
or in the sunshine.
Love this.
Yeah.
Love this for me.
I don't know. I'm terrible at picking out drinks. All right. That's the show. We're excited to have brought it to you. And I think I speak for all my co-hosts when I say, no matter whether the work is in the shadows or way out in the open, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going with your comments, suggestions, and questions on Twitter at @AnalyticsHour, on the web at analyticshour.io, our LinkedIn group, and the Measure Chat Slack group. Music for the podcast by Josh Crowhurst.
Those smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Do the analytics say go for it no matter who's going for it? So if you and I were on the field, the analytics say go for it. It's the stupidest, laziest, lamest thing I've ever heard for reasoning in competition.
Lacey Fusion Productions.
Lacey Fusion. That's our production studio's sister organization on the Southern Hemisphere, covering
Lacey Fusion Media. Fourth Floor Productions.
And Riverside.
Lacey Fusion Media.
He's known for expanding into Australia.
10 Riverside. And the Lacey Fusion Media present a Fourth Floor production.
Okay, well, screw your green bars. You sound like you're in this building with a paper cup and a string. All right, love you.
Love you too. Oh, wait.
Temperature, Matt.
She is so fucking cute.
I know. It's ridiculous.
Like, so cute.
Rock flag, and who knows what insights lurk in the tables of our databases. The shadow analyst knows.
Nice. That's actually pretty close.
I'm like, damn, you got the voice.
That's got something.